What if the words you say every day are the very reason you're stuck, disrespected, or quietly losing control of your life? Most men don't fail because of some massive collapse. They fail in small, unnoticed ways, in the phrases they repeat without thinking. Phrases like, "That's just how I am," or "It's not my fault." These aren't just harmless words. They're slow leaks in your character. And over time, they drain your strength, your clarity, and your ability to lead yourself. In this video, we break down 6 things a foolish man always says. Phrases that feel confident on the surface but are built on fear, pride, and emotional avoidance. Then we rebuild them through the lens of Stoic philosophy, because a Stoic man doesn't talk to defend his ego. He speaks to align with his highest self. If you're ready to stop hiding behind words and start walking with purpose, like this video and subscribe. Let's begin.
Number 1.
That's just how I am. What sounds like self-acceptance is often self-abandonment in disguise. When a man says, "That's just how I am," it can feel like honesty, like he's being real about his nature. But more often, it's a quiet declaration that he's stopped evolving. It's not a celebration of identity. It's an excuse to avoid the discipline of change. Stoicism cuts through this illusion with brutal clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That's not a call for guilt or self-punishment. It's a standard for inner excellence. The Stoic man does not accept weakness as permanent. He observes it, challenges it, and refines it. Because to say "that's just how I am" is to let past wounds and old habits dictate who you remain, and in that surrender, you lose the freedom to grow. Let's make this real. Imagine a man who always loses his temper when criticized. His relationships suffer, his career stalls, and when confronted, he shrugs and says, "That's just how I am." But this isn't identity. It's inertia. It's the path of least resistance. He's choosing the familiar pain of stagnation over the unfamiliar discomfort of transformation. Now contrast that with the Stoic mindset. Epictetus reminds us, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That is the essence of progress. You define your ideal, not just react to your default. You act toward it, day by day, moment by moment, no matter how far it feels. You stop hiding behind fixed traits and start practicing flexible discipline. A powerful example is David Goggins. He was once overweight, depressed, and drowning in self-pity. He could have easily said, "That's just how I am." But he didn't. He took radical ownership of his mind and body. He embraced suffering not as punishment, but as purification. Goggins transformed, not by luck, not by chance, but by repetition, accountability, and relentless inner work. His path is brutal, but also Stoic, because Stoicism isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about choosing it when growth requires it. The man who repeats, "That's just how I am," believes he's defending his truth. But in reality, he's just protecting his ego. He'd rather be consistently broken than temporarily uncomfortable. He treats personality like a prison sentence, unchangeable, final, out of his hands. And over time, those small moments of deflection become a life of regret. Not because he lacked potential, but because he lacked the courage to challenge his own patterns. The Stoic doesn't cling to his story, he rewrites it. He sees himself as clay, not stone, malleable, refined through repetition, pressure, and conscious choice. He does not wait for others to accept his flaws. He works in silence to dissolve them. He doesn't expect perfection, but he demands progress. That's the difference between passive identity and active virtue. And let's be honest, most men who say this phrase don't even believe it. Deep down, they know they're capable of more. They feel the gap between who they are and who they could be. But instead of confronting that gap with discipline, They cover it with slogans, with language that sounds brave but avoids accountability. So let's call it what it is. That's just how I am is not clarity, it's resignation. It's handing over the steering wheel of your life to habit, fear, and the comfort of the familiar. And it always comes with a price: broken trust, stagnant relationships, unrealized purpose. The Stoic alternative is simple but demanding. I am a work in progress, not perfect, not finished, but deliberate. It opens the door to change without shame. It honors your past without being enslaved by it. And most importantly, it puts the power back in your hands. And remember this, language is not neutral. Every time you speak, you shape yourself. Your words are not just reflections of who you are. They're instructions to the mind about who you're becoming. If you keep telling yourself you're stuck, you will be. But if you speak with direction, with discipline, and with clarity, you start moving. Slowly, quietly, but surely. You must challenge the voice that says, stay the same. Because that voice is not your ally. It's your anchor. Every man is faced with a choice. Defend the comfort of who he's been, or do the hard, thankless work of becoming who he could be. One leads to decay, the other to dignity. You are not finished, you are being forged. The next version of you is waiting, but only if you're willing to bury this phrase and rise above it, one choice at a time.
Number 2.
Real men don't talk about feelings. This phrase has ruined more men than it's ever protected. It sounds tough, it sounds strong, but what it really signals is fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being judged, fear of looking vulnerable. And behind that fear is something even darker. A man who's at war with his own emotions and losing. Stoicism is often misunderstood here. People think it means emotional suppression, cold detachment, unfeeling discipline. But that's not Stoicism. That's emotional cowardice wearing the mask of control. True Stoicism isn't about burying your feelings. It's about understanding them so deeply that they no longer control you. Marcus Aurelius journaled through grief, rage, frustration, and despair. If the emperor of Rome made time to confront his inner world, why do modern men think they're above it? He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That includes the emotions that rise within you, especially the ones you'd rather ignore. The man who refuses to talk about his feelings often claims he's protecting others, that he doesn't want to burden anyone. But in truth, he's protecting his ego, not his relationships, because silence isn't strength if it costs you connection, clarity, or peace. Let's take a closer look at what happens. A man suppresses his anger, never processes it, never expresses it, and eventually it leaks out sideways through sarcasm, resentment, emotional distance, or worse, it explodes when least expected. He tells himself he's being stoic, but what he's really being is avoidant. There's a difference between privacy and repression. A stoic man may not advertise every emotion, but he doesn't deny them either. He studies them, sits with them, and when necessary, expresses them with intention, not as a plea for sympathy, but as an act of truth, because to deny your emotions is to deny a part of reality. And Stoicism is rooted in living in accordance with reality. Consider Robin Williams, a man who made millions laugh while carrying a storm of inner pain. By all external measures, success, charisma, admiration, he was thriving. But inside, he was drowning in unspoken feelings. It's a tragic reminder that silence doesn't always mean peace, and that emotional avoidance, even wrapped in humor, can quietly destroy you. Now contrast that with someone like Mr. Rogers, gentle, emotionally present, and deeply stoic in how he navigated life. He didn't collapse under emotion, but he didn't run from it either. He taught millions of children that emotions aren't shameful, they're signals, and when understood, They guide us to live with more honesty and grace. The Stoic doesn't fear emotion, he fears blindness to it, because feelings left unexamined become chains. But when you face them, truly face them, they become fuel, they become clarity, and they become the quiet power behind intentional action. So when a man says real men don't talk about feelings, what he's really saying is, I don't know how to sit with my pain. He's mistaking numbness for control, but a man who cannot access his emotional world cannot access his full wisdom. And worse, he becomes a stranger to himself. The Stoic response? I don't serve my emotions, but I listen to them. You don't have to explain your pain to everyone, but you do have to understand it. Because when you do, it no longer owns you. You become the observer, not the reactor, the steady one in the storm, not the one pretending the storm isn't there. Many men were raised to believe that emotions are weaknesses to be hidden, that pain should be swallowed, that tears make you soft. But this conditioning doesn't create strength, it creates isolation. A man who hides fear will be driven by it. Silence becomes a cage, not a shield. Even Seneca, often thought of as coldly rational, warned against this. He wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears. The goal is not to feel less, but to feel clearly and respond with reason, not reaction." Think of emotions like water behind a dam. If you ignore the cracks, the pressure builds until it breaks you. But if you release pressure with care, the dam holds. That's the Stoic approach. Not fear of feeling, but responsibility for it. So ask yourself, when you avoid your emotions, who are you really protecting? Your pride or your peace? You don't have to bleed in public, but you do have to be honest in private. Once you are, your emotions no longer control you. You control the response. Real strength isn't silence. Real strength is presence. A man who feels deeply and still chooses discipline. That's a man who commands respect, not because he hides what hurts, but because he carries it with grace and lets it sharpen, not shatter, his soul.
Number 3.
It's not my fault. At first glance, this phrase feels like self-defense, a way to protect your dignity after things go wrong. But the deeper truth is this: when a man says, "It's not my fault," he gives away the one thing he cannot afford to lose: his agency. This phrase is the anthem of victimhood. It shifts the spotlight away from responsibility and aims it outward, toward fate, toward people, toward circumstances. And while it might feel good in the moment to blame something external, what it quietly robs you of is far more dangerous. Your power to respond, to adapt, to grow. Stoicism teaches that while you cannot control everything that happens to you, you are always responsible for how you interpret and respond to it. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. A man who lives by this understands that blame is a dead end, but responsibility, that's the beginning of growth. Let's take a real-world example. Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL and leadership consultant, became widely known for his principle of extreme ownership. When things go wrong in his team, he never points fingers. He looks inward. He asks, "What did I miss? What can I do better?" And even though that mindset might seem harsh, it's exactly what made him a trusted leader. Not because he was perfect, but because he was accountable. Now compare that to a man who's always blaming, "My boss is unfair, my ex was crazy, the system's rigged." He might think he's being honest, but in truth, he's stuck in a cycle of deflection. Every time he says, "It's not my fault," what he's really saying is, "I am powerless." And once you accept that story, it becomes your identity. Marcus Aurelius knew this deeply. In his meditations, he reminds himself that the obstacle is not the enemy. The obstacle is the path. The man who chooses blame delays his own evolution. The man who takes responsibility even for what he didn't cause, becomes unstoppable. Why? Because he's not wasting time assigning fault. He's spending energy solving, adapting, learning, and moving forward. There's another layer here. Blame isn't just about other people. Sometimes it's subtle. It's when you say, well, I was just in a bad mood, or that's just how I was raised. It's when you shift your behavior onto old stories. And while those stories may be true, they are not useful if they become excuses. A Stoic doesn't ignore his past, but he doesn't let it dictate his future either. He takes responsibility, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to grow. Now, don't confuse responsibility with self-blame. Stoicism isn't about carrying guilt for everything. It's about accepting what's yours to carry and refusing to waste time resenting the rest. You can't control every outcome, but you can control your response. You can decide what meaning you assign to the moment, and in that choice, however small, you reclaim your power. Steve Jobs once said, "You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." In other words, stop hiding behind excuses. Life is short, time is limited, and blaming others for your pain or your lack of progress doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. The moment you stop pointing fingers and start asking questions, you open the door to clarity. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "It's not my fault," pause. Ask yourself, what is within my control? What can I learn? How can I respond differently next time? This mindset isn't just stoic, it's powerful. It shifts you from victim to author, from static to dynamic, from bitter to better. The stoic alternative is this: I didn't cause this, but I'm responsible for what I do next. That phrase is the beginning of peace. It ends the argument. It brings the focus back to what matters. And most importantly, it makes you a man the world can trust. Because you're not waiting for circumstances to improve. You are becoming the kind of person who improves no matter the circumstances. Blame carries a cost most men ignore. It breeds bitterness and emotional paralysis. The more you blame, the more powerless you feel. Life starts to feel like something happening to you, not something you can shape. And once that mindset takes root, your actions lose direction. But when you shift into responsibility, everything changes. You stop waiting, you stop complaining, you adapt. You take the pain and turn it into fuel. That's what the Stoics meant when they said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Not because it's easy, but because it works. Blame is easy, growth is hard, but only one of them gives you your power back. Choose wisely.
Number 4.
I deserve better. This phrase is often spoken with conviction, with fire, with pain. And on the surface, it sounds like strength, like a man refusing to settle. But dig deeper, and you'll often find something else hiding beneath it. Entitlement. When a man says, "I deserve better," what he's really saying is, "I want more than I'm willing to earn." It's the language of the disappointed dreamer, the frustrated procrastinator, the man who believes the world owes him something just for existing. But the Stoic sees it differently. Life owes you nothing. In fact, the Stoic assumes hardship, expects difficulty, and works regardless of the outcome. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up asking what he deserved. He asked what he was here to do. In his meditations, he reminds himself daily to be of service, to act with justice, discipline, and humility. Not because it earns him anything, but because it's right, he writes, "Don't waste the rest of your time here worrying about other people. It will keep you from doing anything useful." The Stoic path is not about what you're owed. It's about what you're building, through virtue, through repetition, through will. Let's examine where this phrase shows up in modern life. A man doesn't get the promotion he hoped for. He mutters, "I deserve better," and walks around with resentment instead of reflection. Another man gets left by someone he neglected for years and declares, "I deserve better," without asking what he gave, how he showed up, or what part of him needs to grow. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What you deserve is often revealed not by your desires, but by your discipline. You don't rise to your hopes, you fall to your habits, and the man who says he deserves more without becoming more is stuck in the most dangerous illusion of all, thinking he can skip the process and still receive the reward. That's not Stoic, that's delusional. Now, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with wanting better treatment, better relationships, better outcomes. But the Stoic separates desire from entitlement. Wanting better is fuel. Expecting better without change is poison. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." This quote pierces through the emotional fog because the man who obsesses over what he lacks often misses what he can actually do. He's so focused on what he's not getting, he forgets to focus on what he can give, what he can change, and who he can become through the struggle. Let's look at someone like Keanu Reeves. By Hollywood standards, he's an anomaly. Quiet, disciplined, private. He doesn't chase headlines. He doesn't complain about the roles he didn't get or the recognition he didn't receive. He just works. And slowly over time, his presence grew stronger than any demand he could have made. That's Stoic. He doesn't say, "I deserve better." He becomes better and lets the world respond in its own time. Contrast that with the man constantly posting about how misunderstood he is, how nobody appreciates him, how life has been unfair. These men may gain attention, but they lose something greater, their grounding. Because the moment you argue with reality, you become a prisoner of it. You start chasing fairness instead of building resilience. You start waiting for validation instead of forging inner worth. So what's the Stoic alternative? It's this: I'm going to earn what I want or grow from what I don't get. That mindset cannot be stopped because it replaces expectation with action. It removes entitlement and replaces it with excellence. And over time, the world respects that. Not immediately, but eventually. It's easy to say, "I deserve better." It feels good, it feeds the ego. But what builds character is harder and quieter. It's the man who shows up over and over, without applause, without recognition, without guarantees, and still gives his best, because he knows the real reward isn't handed to him, it's grown inside him. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I deserve better," stop, take a breath, then ask, what can I do better? What can I give? Who can I become? Because a man who thinks he deserves the world will always be disappointed, but a man who builds himself daily will eventually create a world he no longer needs to beg from. When a man says, "I deserve better," he often means easier, more praise, less resistance. But Stoicism teaches that comfort isn't the goal. Virtue is. Ease isn't a reward. It's a test. Who are you when no one notices? That's the real measure. The Stoic man doesn't complain when life gets hard. He sharpens. He lets the process shape him. Because what you become through struggle is worth far more than what you get without it.
Number 5.
That's not my job. At first, it sounds like boundaries, like a man protecting his time, his energy, his role. But more often, it's not protection. It's avoidance, and not the kind that builds clarity, but the kind that shrinks you. When a man says, "That's not my job," what he's often doing is drawing a line between effort and apathy, between initiative and inertia. He's telling the world, "I'll only do what I'm told. I'll only act when it's written in the manual. I'll only lead when someone gives me permission." That's not power, that's passivity, and it slowly robs a man of his influence. The Stoic man doesn't ask, "Is this my job?" He asks, "Is this within my power to improve?" If the answer is yes, he steps in, not for credit, not for applause, but because he lives by responsibility, not convenience. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. What's hidden in that line is a deeper truth. Right action isn't always comfortable, and it's rarely convenient. But it's always your job if you claim to be a man of principle. Now let's make this real. Imagine a workplace where problems fester because people keep saying, "Not my department," or a family where no one takes initiative because it's not their role. Over time, everything stagnates, resentment grows, trust dies, and the ones who could have led never did, because they were waiting for the title instead of embracing the need. Contrast that with the mindset of someone like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Early in his career, he wasn't just focused on lifting weights or delivering lines. He was focused on showing up fully, helping crew, encouraging others, leading without being asked, and that consistent character turned him from a role player into a leader people want to follow. Not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. There's a quiet law of life. The more you avoid responsibility, the smaller your influence becomes. You may feel safe, but you are not seen. You may feel efficient, but you are not remembered. Why? Because the world does not reward people who wait to be told what matters. It rewards those who decide what matters and act accordingly. The Stoic man doesn't chase titles. He doesn't wait for perfect clarity. He sees a need, and he becomes the answer. Not out of ego, but out of alignment. Because he knows that greatness isn't found in doing what's assigned. It's found in doing what's needed. Now, this doesn't mean you let people take advantage of you. Stoicism is not self-neglect, it's self-mastery. And part of that mastery is knowing when to step forward and when to say no with calm, not bitterness. But too many men use "that's not my job" as a shield, a way to avoid discomfort, a way to stay small while pretending to be focused. But the truth is, what you ignore becomes someone else's leverage, and what you step up to, consistently, silently, without complaint, becomes your power. Seneca said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But what if opportunity never arrives because you keep dodging responsibility? What if your next breakthrough is hidden inside the thing you're avoiding? There is deep freedom in showing up without being asked, in doing the right thing when no one's watching, in filling the gap no one claimed. That's how trust is built. That's how legacy is shaped. And that's how a Stoic man becomes indispensable, not by titles, but by action. So the next time the voice in your head whispers, "That's not my job," respond with this: "If I can make it better, it is my job." That phrase is dangerous in the best way. It breaks you out of passivity, it lifts you above your role, and it brings meaning back into moments most people miss. Real leadership isn't announced, it's demonstrated. It's not loud, it's quiet, it's not ego-driven, it's rooted in service. And the man who lives this way doesn't just move forward, he brings others with him. You want influence? Step up where others step back. You want purpose? Embrace what others avoid, because the world is filled with men who do what they're told. But the man who does what's needed, he becomes unforgettable. Waiting to be seen before you act is dangerous. When you only move for recognition, your identity depends on applause. But the Stoic moves in silence. He does what's right when no one's watching. That's how real confidence is forged. "That's not my job" doesn't just limit your work, it limits your becoming. But every time you step up, even in quiet ways, you expand. You grow, you become a man who builds life, not just reacts to it. Number 6, it is what it is. This phrase can sound stoic, it can sound wise, detached, even peaceful. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the time when a man says, "it is what it is," he isn't accepting reality. he's surrendering to it. There's a difference between acceptance and resignation. One is active, the other is passive. One clears your vision, the other clouds your purpose, and the Stoic knows this difference well. Stoicism teaches that we must accept what we cannot control, but only so we can focus our energy on what we can. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events, realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't telling us to retreat from life. He was telling us to get clear so we could act with intention. But when most people say, "It is what it is," what they're really saying is, "I'm done trying." They've confused detachment with disengagement. They've stopped caring, not because they're above the situation, but because they feel helpless within it. This mindset can show up anywhere. A man watches his health decline and says, "It is what it is." Another man stays in a toxic relationship and repeats, "It is what it is." A third man gives up on his goals, his clarity, his strength, and every time he falls short, he whispers the same phrase like a lullaby to numb the pain. But the Stoic doesn't use acceptance to avoid action. He uses it to sharpen it. Let's look at someone like Ryan Holiday, a man who has brought Stoic philosophy to the modern world not by talking about it, but by living it. When faced with criticism, setbacks, or unpredictable circumstances, he doesn't collapse into passivity. He shifts, he adapts, he writes, he builds. Because real Stoic acceptance doesn't paralyze you, it prepares you. "It is what it is" can only be useful if followed by, "So what am I going to do about it?" That's the missing piece. That's the bridge between wisdom and waste. Because if you stop at acceptance, you stay stuck. But if you move through it, you grow. Seneca warned about this kind of mental surrender. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And one of the most common ways men waste their time is by telling themselves they have no choice, when in truth, they've just stopped choosing. Now, does this mean we should fight everything? Of course not. The Stoic learns to release what's outside his control, but he never lets that become an excuse for not mastering what's within it. His mindset is simple. I can't change the event, but I can change what it means, how I respond, and who I become because of it. There's power in stillness, but there's danger in stagnation. Stillness is a decision. Stagnation is a drift. And the phrase, "it is what it is," often disguises the second as the first. Let's be honest. Sometimes we say it just to avoid pain, to dodge discomfort, to numb the call to change. But pain ignored is pain multiplied, and the Stoic knows that peace doesn't come from avoiding hard things. It comes from facing them, fully and clearly, and still walking forward. So what's the alternative? Instead of saying, "It is what it is," say, "This is real, now I move." That sentence does two things. It honors reality without being owned by it, and it calls you back to agency, where your power lives. You're going to face setbacks, people will disappoint you, plans will fall apart. But none of that means you have to collapse. You can pause without quitting, you can grieve without giving up, you can accept the storm without sitting still in it. The Stoic man doesn't just survive chaos. He orients within it. He breathes, assesses, and chooses the next right thing, over and over, until the ground returns beneath him. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "It is what it is," ask yourself, am I saying this because I'm clear, or because I'm tired, because I understand the limits of control, or because I've abandoned it? Acceptance should lead to action, not absence. Use this phrase too often, and it becomes identity. Say "it is what it is" long enough, and you'll believe nothing can change, that your story is set. But Stoicism says otherwise. The script isn't over unless you stop writing it. Sometimes forward means not accepting less, but expecting more from yourself, especially when no one else does. You are not here to float through life. You are here to meet it as it is, but never as less than who you can become. That's Stoicism, that's strength, that's movement. You've just seen the 6 phrases that quietly weaken a man from the inside out. They sound normal, they sound common, but over time, they rot your character, dull your ambition, and turn you into someone who survives life instead of shaping it. But now you know better, and once you know, you can't go back. So the next time one of these phrases slips into your mind, pause, don't repeat it, replace it, because your words aren't just reflections of your thoughts, they are the blueprints of your becoming. You don't need louder opinions, you need clearer standards, and the man who holds himself to a higher standard, even in silence, builds a life that doesn't need defending. If this video hit you hard, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're serious about walking the Stoic path, subscribe and join the men who choose clarity over comfort every single day.